Awesome. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Scott, and I am the grant coordinator at First Five Shasta. I am putting on this grant writing workshop so you can learn all about First Five Shasta grants. And this meeting's recorded, so it can be accessed at a later date. You're all muted, but you'll have the opportunity to be unmuted towards the end of the meeting, where you can have the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. So what I'll ask you to do is, as I'm going through, if anything comes to mind, just jot those questions down. And then at the end, we can have some open dialogue and open conversation about those questions that you have. So on the docket today, we're going to be talking about grants available, the goals and cycles, grant writing tips and things that we're looking for. An example of a successful application. We're going to talk about reporting and some other grant nuances that are just kind of unwritten things, but I wanted to talk to you about and make you aware of as we're approving grants. And then at the end, we'll do that Q&A. I also have Liz Poole here with us, the deputy director at First Five Shasta. She's my co-host today, and she'll be able to help navigate some of these questions if there's things that I might not be able to answer myself, and to provide some support. So thanks for being on here, Liz. All right. So if my slideshow will cooperate, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about and show you is our First Five Shasta goals and objectives. So we have three major goals that we use to guide all of our work at First Five Shasta. And the first goal is adverse childhood experiences are reduced and prevented in the Shasta County 0 to 5 population. Goal 2 is that all children 0 to 3 in Shasta County have healthy beginnings and optimal development. And goal 3 is that all children will be prepared for and enter school ready to learn. So you can see there's some subcategories within our goals that kind of break them down a little bit further. But all grant applications and any of the work we do and investments that we make at First Five are tied back to these goals and really what we're all about. So any projects that you're applying for need to fit within one of these goals. And in fact, the application that you submit will make you select one of these goals. So it's important that your project ties into one of these things and one of these goals and objectives. We have two overarching funding priorities, and one of those things is family strengthening, which could include parent and caregiver education, prenatal supports, and support for preventing and addressing ACEs, so that parents can adequately support and advocate for their child's health and development. And then we're really looking at systems change and improving the efficacy of systems of care that are serving children in Shasta County through coordination, advocacy, through really helping those organizations grow their capacity, reducing those silos and barriers, reducing the duplication, and really just bolstering the systems change work within our community that helps children 0 to 5 and their families. So those are the two subcategories. So you'll see on our goals these little icons of which one indicates family strengthening and which one is an indicator for systems change. So let's talk about the competitive grants we have. So we have what we call Good Neighbor grants. We have goal-specific grants, scholarships, Week of the Young Child, and sponsorship grants. And again, all of these competitive grants need to meet at least one of our goals and objectives. So hopefully you've heard of some of these. Our Good Neighbor grants, so the cost amount you can apply for is $500 to $1,500, and it's to support goal-related or short-term, maybe one-time projects, and it's typically through things like materials, supplies, equipment, and they're projects that meet our goals but don't necessarily meet the other criteria of First Five grants, and you'll learn about what those other grants are. But we have a total budget of $25,000 per year. So we have 2 cycles that occur, and we'll talk more about the grant cycles later. That's just a quick overview of our Good Neighbor grant, and I'm going to give you some examples of things we funded in the past. This is actually from our last fiscal year. So one of the examples, the YMCA did a room revitalization for their childcare facility. They needed a more efficient way to check in children and sign them out. So they had an electronic system that they used to do that, just to make things run a lot more smoothly. And they had some dilapidated furniture and other things that they needed to fix within their environment. They serve a lot of children. They have a lot of programs that they do for kids there. So this was a need for them. This was something that fit our Good Neighbor grant perfectly. The Child Abuse Prevention Month materials was something that we also funded from Pathways to Hope for Children. They did a huge campaign bringing awareness about reducing child abuse and neglect. So we paid for some of those materials to do that, radio spots, marketing, things to help them get the word out about reducing child abuse and awareness about the prevalence of child abuse in our community. We also funded an Easter egg hunt. The Active 2030 Club put that community event on for children to do an Easter egg hunt. And we, of course, have them fill those eggs with things other than things like candy. We want them to be giving maybe some kind of educational toys or, some things that aren't just like candy, things like that. So that was a great community event that brought in lots of families and children, especially in COVID times. People need something to do, something to look forward to connect with other families. So that was perfect fit for our Good Neighbor grant and something that we funded. We get a lot of requests through Good Neighbor grants for playground and childcare improvements. That's kind of where this fits. And some examples of that might be a preschool expanding and needing to purchase more equipment to accommodate more children, a new startup childcare facility, family childcare, or private center that may need some equipment. So our goal is they are participating in QCNS, so they're getting those funds. So maybe there's a need, they're brand new and they need other things, and that's where they're asking first five for some support, and that's where it would probably be appropriate for us to do that. We'll talk more about QCNS and how those funds interact with First Five later, but I just wanted to give an example of something that we have funded in the past or a good example of what a Good Neighbor grant would cover. Next, we have our goal-specific grants, and this is a more competitive grant. The award amount is higher. It's $1,500 to $5,000 that a grantee could apply for. And we have sort of two subcategories. We have project grants, and those are our competitive grants, and we have $15,000 a year that we award in their one-year contracts. And typically we bring in an external community member, a commissioner, or someone else that can help us make an informed decision on all of these wonderful applications that we receive, because there are a lot of great applications and only so much funding that we can award. So we do have to make some hard decisions and decisions that best serve the community and best meet our goals at First Five. Then we have something called commission grants, which these aren't advertised, like you won't see this go out on MailChimp or typically on our social media. And those are really commission driven and by specific invitation or a specific RFA based on the needs in our community. So we set out the table for a lot of different collaboratives. We really learn about the needs within the community and how we can best use those funds. And I'm going to give you some examples on the next slide here of what that could look like. So for our goal specific grant, the project grants, and actually I included some of the commission grants in these examples as well. Turtle Bay put on an event called the Bubble Palooza. So it was a special event where they had all these cool bubble activities for families and kids to participate in, sort of a STEM project. And so we funded that for Turtle Bay. It was something that served a lot of children and families. So that's an example of a goal specific grant that was funded. Again, a playground expansion. This kind of fit under goal specific grant because it was a higher cost for one of our larger preschools that was taking more children and just really needed extra equipment to accommodate them. So just some examples of the goal specific grants. An example of a commission driven where we learned of a need and we invited them to apply for a commission grant is that it's Mercy Medical NICU breast milk analyzer. So this was a need for babies in the NICU who they really wanted to make sure we're getting proper nutrition. So they needed this specific machine to analyze the breast milk and see the nutritional profile and make sure that if they needed to supplement that child with something else, that they could do that. So that's an example of something that we learned of as a need. We were able to partner with them through that commission-driven goal-specific grant. Next, we have scholarships, and those are grants ranging from $500 to $1,500 to support costs with any kind of training or goal-related topic that um, further the applicant or organization's mission for program staff serving the 0 to 5 population. And we have about $10,000 for that each year. So just to talk a little bit about those examples. So Triple P certification, this is a common one that we get requests for. Families Thrive training, CMBM training. So those professional development opportunities and trainings. This is less so for things like higher education because we have a program in QCNS that can help with those costs to obtain higher education for childcare providers that are participating in that program. But this is really for trainings and certifications. It can be cost associated with the training itself, your registration fee, or the travel costs associated, which we haven't really had a lot of travel lately, so that's been kind of non-existent, but just really for the cost of those trainings to build your professional development and serve families in our community. And a lot of times what we ask, if you're asking for a scholarship grant, if you want to be certified in CMBM or another model, we will likely ask and maybe even put in the contract that you would provide an overview of that training for our First 5 Institute Smart Starts or Smart Lunches, which are professional development opportunities that First 5 Shasta offers. So we really want to utilize those trainers and those skills and put them back into the community when we can. So just something to keep in mind if you're going to apply for a scholarship to be certified in something, we may ask you to come back to First 5 Shasta and share with us what you learned and share with the community some great skills that you learned from that training. Week of the Young Child. I hope that you all have heard of this and that you've participated in something in our community through Week of the Young Child, but it's every year in April. It's, through NAUIC, all over the place. People are celebrating Week of the Young Child and really bringing attention to that, our youngest members of the community, parents, teachers, all of the important people that we need to build our young children. So we have grants, they're competitive grants for community members, organizations, providers to apply for that are doing some sort of special activity during Week of the Young Child. So the range is $100 to $500. And we have $15,000 to spend in total, and about half of that is for program expenses. So hopefully you've seen some of the beautiful Week of the Young Child calendars that have gone out that, this year was mostly electronic. We did distribute some due to the nature of, the way things are right now. But so we use those funds to create those calendars, get the word out to families, to purchase books so that at these great events that are hosted throughout the community during this week, they can that organization can give the children and families like a goodie bag with some really great books that First 5 Shasta provides. So I'll give you some examples of Week of the Young Child grants that have been funded and some pictures. These are from this last year's Week of the Young Child. But we had a Reading is Dynamite drive-through. So at the Anderson Library, families drove through and got to see this character. I think he was like Dewey the something. I'm not quite sure what he is, but handing out, book bags and goodies for kids and families and activities to do together at home. KXE did a drive-through safety zone. We funded that project. And there was CHP, CAL FIRE, just a bunch of emergency Dewey the Decimal. Thank you, Brian. So they had CAL FIRE, just different safety personnel there. So the children and families could drive through, check out the emergency vehicles and get, again, some great books and some other nice little goodie bags to take home. And then same thing, Welcome to the Jungle was a drive-through at Pathways to Hope for Children, another great event drive-through. The YMCA, we funded a project for them where they had an open, so kids and families could come and do a STEAM project. So they had like dinosaurs and these, like, I don't know what they were like these little dino eggs, and you put the dino eggs in the bowl with the whatever liquid concoction and the dinosaur, the egg melted, the dinosaur came out. So it was something fun that parents and kids could do together in person. That was great. And then they had some other artsy stuff that they were able to do. Um, so that was open to the public, and they had a pretty great turnout for that. And then community resource bags. So this was another drive-through event that Shasta Head Start provided in, I want to say, Fall River or Bernie or both, I think. So they handed out resource bags with local resources in the community, where to find critical services and supports, and then those books that they received from us at First Five Shasta. So those are some examples of Week of the Young Child activities, things that we funded in the past. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then have our sponsorship grants. And these grants are the sponsorship of community activities, and it provides opportunities to families to build strong relationships with their children. And we have these grants that are ranging from $1,500 to $15,000. And again, this one is invitation based on community need. And we have about $32,000 a year. And I'll give you some examples of what that looks like for sponsorships. So we built a partnership with the city of Reading, who offer Grasshopper sports to young children. And so it's a sports program, and so that families can participate who maybe don't have the funds to pay for something like that. So we have a partnership with the city of Reading. It's a sponsorship that we've created. It's not a grant that we put out to everybody. Same with the North State Symphony Little Ones concert. Hopefully you've heard of this. Maybe you've participated in past years, but we provide a somewhat small amount of money for something that goes a really long way in our community. Children get to go to the live orchestra and learn about musical instruments. Super fun. A lot of our local preschools and childcare facilities, TK programs attend this. This year it was virtual, as you can see this picture. They did a phenomenal job making it virtual and making it work. So that's an example of a sponsorship that we have funded in the past, and we continue to partner with them. Then I just stuck on here the Children's Bench, the Reading Library. When COVID hit, we were really looking for ways to give children things to do and opportunities that were COVID safe. So this Children's Bench was able to be placed outside. We could have some outdoor reading time with kids spaced, 6 feet apart. So that was something that was a need at the Reading Library that we funded. So that's an example of our sponsorships. So I want to give you an idea of our structure and our timelines of how it works. So and you can find this information on our website, when grants open, you'll see that, Good Neighbor Grants now open, or it'll say Good Neighbor Grants closed if you're looking on our website. But Good Neighbor Grant, we have 2 cycles, and they run from July to December, then we open them up again January to April, or if we're out of funding before December, then we'll close it. Same with that second cycle. If we're out of funding before April, then we'll close it. And with Good Neighbor Grants, if you apply for a Good Neighbor Grant, you're going to get all of that money up front. Some of the other grants aren't that way. Our scholarships, we will give, it opens in July, it goes until funds are expended, and you're going to get half of that award up front and half upon completion. And the idea is you're going to get half up front and then half at the end once you submit that final report. So we see that you've completed your project, you receive the training, and then we're going to give you that second half of the money when you submit your final report. The same holds true for goal-specific project grants and our commission grants, half up front, half at the end upon completion of your final report. We'll talk a little bit more about final reporting later on. And then same with sponsorships, half up front, half at the end. Week of the Young Child, we're giving all of those funds up front, just like we do the Good Neighbor Grant. So just frame of reference for you. So let's talk about some basic tips for your application. We're looking for a clear intention and the results that you expect to achieve. So I think one of the first things you have to identify on your application is, some results you're going to expect to achieve and really what you're trying to do with the money. So a clear, concise couple of sentences that tells us exactly what you're going to do and what your expected results are. Sometimes we'll get that 2 to 3 sentence intention and results, and it's like it doesn't match the body of the rest of the application. So if you're putting that intention in there, you'll want to make sure that everything kind of matches what you're saying you're going to do, and and backing up those results that you're going to achieve. And then again, relating our goals and objectives, tie that back to tie your project back to our goals and objectives, and really what our mission is, that first five. And think to yourself, does this fit? If not, then maybe this isn't the right grant application for you. But it needs to fit within our goals. Some of the simple things I just wanted to lay the foundation with, and simple tips, is budget information. Break down all the costs so we can see exactly what you're asking for. So if you're applying for a Good Neighbor grant, and you want to create some activity bags for children and families to take home and do together, you'll need to spell out exactly what is in those activity bags. Are you buying crayons and paper, and I'm just throwing things out there, Play-Doh? Then you would need to outline what those items are, the cost of each, and the total cost per bag, and then the total cost. So the more information you can give us, the better. We need to see exactly where those funds are going. And then we have opportunity for you to upload any supporting documentation. So if you have quotes, if you have an Amazon cart that shows, say you're purchasing, a piece of equipment for your playground, send us a picture of exactly what that is and how much it costs. That is all ammunition for you, and in your backup, so that you can give us all the information for, potentially a successful approved grant application. So some other important information I want to just share before I kind of get too deep into the weeds is that grant funds aren't a guarantee, and we're really making the best decisions on behalf of our agency for our community. So I'll talk about this a little bit later too, but we're looking at how many kids are being served, what's the community impact, what's the need. So if you apply and you're not approved, there's a lot of different factors that we're looking at, and we're trying to make the best investment possible for the greatest number of kids and families in our community. So these funds are not guaranteed; it's competitive. So if you're not approved, we do encourage you to reach out and talk to us about maybe why that might be, or if there's a better fit for your funds. And typically, we will tell you that if you're not approved, we'll give you that information, but. I am your main contact if you have other questions, and you want to talk it out further. Sometimes I'll reach out directly to people, just to give you a better understanding and help you maybe apply for future grants. Like, I'm a resource for you, so please utilize me, and contact me, and I can put my contact information. I think that's my last slide. I just wanted to let you know that you can apply for more than one grant type, but it needs to be like for a separate project. So say Good Neighbor grants are open and goal specific grants are open, and you have the same project, you're going to apply for both those two grants, and that's not going to work. So if you'll need to have one project per grant. So I just wanted to make mention of that. And then our fiscal year. So it's important to identify those dates when you're making a grant request. If you're applying for a grant, and say you apply in April and your project isn't going to be done until August, June 30th is the end of our fiscal year. So then August would be the next fiscal year. So you'd want to apply in July. So July 1 through June 30th, that is when projects need to take place. We've had some instances where folks will apply in their projects outside of that fiscal year, and we're like, oh, this isn't the right timeline, so please reapply in the future. So just keep that in mind. And if you're unsure, you can totally ask me, email me, and I can help you with that. There are other grants through First Five. That's a partnership with SCOE called the IEEEP grants, and those will not be discussed on this call. We're going to have a separate meeting in which we will discuss those grants because they're a little bit different, and we wanted to pull those out separately. So on the horizon, we'll talk more about those. Just to provide some further clarification for QC&S providers and First Five grants, I get questions of like, can I apply? I'm a QC&S provider. And the answer is yes, you can. What I will say is that you need to have a really strong proposal, because we have QC&S as this program that provides a lot of grant funding for providers like family child care, family friend and neighbor, private preschool. So there is a program that is really focused on working with that population. So if you are a QCNS provider, you need to clarify in your application where those other QCNS funds are going and how come you are asking for more funds. We want to see how you're leveraging. So again, maybe it's a new program and they're like, yeah, I used all my money because I didn't have a safe playground and now I need some, indoor furniture because I don't have enough tables for the kids to sit at, or whatever it might be. Or maybe there's a huge safety issue, like, I use all my QCNS funds to address the safety issue. Now there's some other pieces that I need to address because it's important for safety or whatever. I'm just throwing out some examples. So you really need to identify what the need is. If you are not a QCNS provider, we will likely refer you to QCNS, because that's where we really want people to be leveraging those funds that are specific for, our 0 to 5, the early care and learning providers. So it's just an important note that I wanted to make about QCNS. And we know that allocations will come the next fiscal year. We know that bonus allocations are coming for those providers. So we're really looking at those funds, and we want those to be accessed first as the best use, as the best way to leverage and make smart financial investments for first five. So I hope that answers and clears up some questions and concerns about QCNS, Quality Council or state. And again, take your questions down. If you have questions, we'll answer those at the end here. Okay, so I want to really drill down to what we're looking for so I can give you some, help you kind of critically think about how you want to frame your application. And I took these questions off of one of our rubrics that we use to make decisions. Whoops. So I just want to talk about some of these things and think about these as you're writing a grant. As you're writing your grant, how well do the proposed strategies and activities clearly address the identified goals and initiatives? Are you addressing those things? Does it match? Is your project realistic? Do you have the staff capacity to execute the project? So I think of like larger organizations that are applying, like if they're applying for a grant from us, we're really looking at, okay, does this seem realistic, or do they have the manpower to get it done? And then providing rationale for your project. Give us all the information. Why is this important? How many people are you serving? Are there other funds to access? And if so, are you using those? Give us all the information. I think we have a character limit. We're not looking for 10 pages. I don't want to give you that impression, like 10 pages of, it doesn't need to be super lengthy, but we definitely need enough information and support of why you're requesting these funds. And so again, we're looking at how well the project integrates and coordinates with existing resources, to maximize the impact of the proposed services. We're looking at how your proposal clearly addresses the need, like what's the need in the community. And we're looking at if you clarify, provide documentation of that or clarification to us, how well you're going to be able to reach your target population. Who is the target population? We're looking at numbers to be served, like how many kids and families are you serving? Is that realistic based on what you're proposing? Are you giving us expected outcomes and indicators? Are those clearly identified in your project? What's the lasting impact going to be? Long-term, what's the sustainability? So those are pieces. And this is, again, these questions and what I'm asking you to think about, this came from our goal-specific grant, which is a little bit more competitive. But these are still really great things to think of when you're writing a Good Neighbor grant or any grant. You want to be thinking about these things. And then again, the last couple here is your project aligned with our mission, current and past activities and capacities and expertise? And then do you have the administrative capability to manage the proposed project? So these are good things to think about. Again, this is recorded and you can access this later. So if you forget, or if you want to take a screenshot, it's just good information to keep handy as you start getting your creative juices flowing to write a really great application. So let's look at an example. So I'm going to show you, this is a goal specific grant, and I think this is Pathways. So they tell us, here's their project summary and purpose. So they're requesting funds to provide financial assistance for housing application fees to aid a current gap in services in Shasta County and increase the chances of families with children ages 0 to 5 obtaining housing in order to work on restoring the family's quality of life, goal obtainment, parenting skills, while creating a safe place for children to thrive. So a pretty strong project summary that identifies the purpose, the results that they're expecting to achieve, and so pretty solid. And then we look at these are the actual questions on the goal specific grant. We're asking for how activities address our goals, details about how they're going to conduct the project, and descriptions of the activities, timelines, collaboration with other agencies and partners. So they identify that they're going to provide housing application fee assistance for 70 families. So there's some hard data for us who are applying to countless rental agencies in hopes of renting a home for their families. They kind of identify the problem here by talking about families who are able to apply to multiple homes. Apartments are much more likely to find a home aiding in meeting the family's immediate needs and mitigating the threat of homelessness that often results in hopeless fear, repeating this cycle of ACEs, child endangerment, and addiction. Um, so their plan, they state here, is to complete the housing application fee request. Um, and basically, so they're paying for those housing application fees, and they talk about that here and the importance of that and the ramifications if they don't have this type of service or support. So I won't read the whole thing to you, but they give us all the information here. And then they talk about, we ask who the project's going to serve, the number of individuals. So they're anticipating 40 to 70 families. Depending on how many applications they need per family, there could be 2 or 3 applications. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat and I'll answer that in just a minute. So Brian, so I got a question in the chat box and it asked about the goal that they tied it to. So I'm thinking this is going to be goal 1. I don't have it off the top of my hand, but they will actually have to select that specific goal on their application. So, they talk about reducing ACEs and homelessness and all of those pieces. So that would probably fit under goal 1. But Brian says this is specific to this is the goal specific grant. So this is a little higher cost, more competitive grant application. This is one of our partner agencies, Pathways to Hope for Children, applying for this grant. So kind of back to the question here, they talk about the problem. They give a problem statement. So the main complaint is that no agencies or organizations are assisting with application fees, and the rental market is too competitive. Therefore, they can't afford paying for multiple application fees. So they address why this is a huge need, the problem. And so they give us a pretty strong backing of like, wow, this is impactful and people aren't going to be able to access housing and pay all these application fees, especially with limited capacity or limited inventory, I should say, for housing right now. We'll go to the next page here. They give a rationale. They talk about it's a major gap in services. They have the staffing capacity because they're already working with clients that are experiencing homelessness and setting goals with those families. And they talk about families are unable to obtain their goals without the stability of a home, thus increasing the further child services involvement or potentially returning to unsafe situations and abusive relationships. So they talk about their specific outcomes, and they state that we project that as families obtain not only help with applying for housing, but obtaining housing itself, their hope levels will increase in other areas as they learn how capable they really are to obtain their family's needs. And they talk about how they're going to measure that. They say, we plan to measure the parents' hope levels via Dr. Chan's evidence-based hope scale before and after obtaining housing to evaluate and prove the importance of the housing first model. They talk about their organization's capacity to effectively implement the proposed project. And they state that they are an umbrella for a wide range of services. They do a lot in our community. They provide case management. They talk about who exactly is going to do the work. Associate Director Patty Price will provide project reports and direction as project lead with the support of Kelly, our data specialist, and Eric will provide support as a parent partner supervisor and Hope a navigator to assist in measuring hope. So they give us some pretty good details here, and I'm not reading verbatim, I'm just picking pieces out. So then their sample budget information. This is a really basic. It's they're requesting $3,000 to cover the cost of housing applications. They give the cost per adult $35 to $45 per applicant. They estimate that they can help up to 70 families. And they're estimating that each family will have 2 children. So this is a place that we notice a lot at First Five Shasta where things fall short, is we will get a really beautiful grant application and the budget does not provide enough information. It will just say things like, um, food for, parent night dinner or whatever. And there's no breakdown of like what those costs exactly are. Or again, I go back to those, if you're sending home activity kits, what are all the things that you're going to be paying for? If you're asking for fees to take families to do certain activities in the community, like some of our larger organizations that work with a specific population, if they're taking them to go do a play group somewhere and there's a fee to get in, to say they're going to Rare Air or somewhere where there's a fee to enter, we need all of that lined out so we know exactly what you're using the money for. But as you can see, it doesn't have to be like an Excel spreadsheet necessarily for a Good Neighbor grant. Like, we just need you to really just identify that, and you can write it right on the application. Some of the bigger grants, we will require a more extensive budget, but I think for this call, the goal specific and the Good Neighbor grant, it's not, it should be pretty simplistic. Just tell us everything you're planning to spend money on and what the grand total is. So some considerations that we make or that we're thinking about when we're making a funding decision is how many children are being served. We want to get the biggest bang for our buck. So we want to make sure that, whatever project you're doing is going, what's the impact and how many kids are benefiting, how many families are benefiting. So these are things important for us to know and to think about when we're making a decision. And then we're also looking at the community impact. So what is the benefit of this to our community? What kind of impact is it going to make? And then we're also looking at the grantee history, like if they've received grants from us before. So maybe if you've received a grant before, we would choose, and we've already kind of given some money for a certain project, we might, choose another applicant if that hasn't gotten any grant funding from us before, that has another need that's significant. Or in another instance, maybe if the grantee has received grants in the past, we're looking at, okay, did they do what they told us they were going to do? Did they fill out the final report? Was their event or project successful? So we're looking at those things as we make decisions. So sort of the grantee history. If you get an approved grant and yay, you're going to go forward with your project, you're going to do all the activities and wonderful things that you said you were going to do, and you do them. The next step after you get a contract from us, you sign that you're going to do as stated, you get your check or partial payment depending on what grant you receive. You complete your project. That's not the end for you. We have reporting. So basically that's our accountability. We want to make sure that the project was completed as proposed, and that, you did what you said you were going to do. Occasionally there are changes in projects. We know that sometimes, like especially right now, materials are hard to obtain. So things are delayed, which is a whole ripple effect from COVID. Yay. Thank you again, COVID. So it's okay if there's some changes you need to make. Maybe your stuff isn't going to be here on time and you need to get something else that's similar, but not exactly what you said. You would need to reach out to First Five, to myself, and I check in with the other directors to approve those changes and make sure that it works for us and it still falls within the intent of your project. So any changes need to be pre-approved, and then you will also identify those changes in your final report. It will ask you if there are any changes, and you would say, yes, we did X, Y, and Z, we got a prior approval, and it still fits the intent of the main intent of our project, something to that effect. But your reporting is going to tell us exactly how things went. We love to hear a success story from you. What was successful? What was challenging about implementing your grant? there's several questions. It's not super lengthy or super time consuming, I would say, compared to like a state grant. Like we are kind of the, we're an easier, more flexible type of organization than a state or federal grant. But this should kind of give you the training wheels to maybe in the future apply for something like that. Um, but when you're doing your invoicing, if you got a scholarship or a goal specific grant, you will be receiving the second half of that once you submit your final reports. You're going to fill out the report, answer all the questions, and then you're going to attach an invoice for the second half of your funding and then submit. So once you do that, I get your invoice, your report, then we will send you a check for the second half of your funds if you've completed your project as, as in your contract and as we talked about. Some things that happen on a final report, it will ask you to put in the total amount that you spent. So it really helps me when people spend their grant money and they're reporting what they spent to put the grand total. So with tax, with your shipping, put all of that on there for me. That's helpful. So I'm not like, they're missing $200. And then I go to your receipts. I say, oh, okay, shipping and tax, that puts them at their $200. So put that grand total in there so we can see how much it is. And you're going to want to attach all of your backup documentation, your receipts. I love it when people attach pictures. I think there's an attachment section in there where you can attach some pictures if you had a really great project or you revamped some stuff. We love to see that. We love to see kind of how our dollars are being used. And then submit your report as soon as you can after the project's completed. So although our contracts are for 1 year, you're welcome to submit your report sooner than that. If you're done, if your project only took you like a few months, you're done, you've seen what the impact is and you're ready to report, I can send you that report link earlier. So that's kind of nice to get it off your plate and be done with it. But typically they will come 30 days before, the link will come 30 days before the end of your project date. So it's an auto-generated email that goes out, and we use a system for all of these grants. Everything's electronic. Sometimes there are, as we all know, errors or things happen, weird stuff with our online system. So if you're I've had a couple instances where grantees are getting report form links before their project starts, like that's an error. So there's still nuances that we're working out, but you'll get that grant report link automatically from a no reply email. Same as when you're approved for a grant, you're going to get an auto email saying, congratulations, you've been approved with the award amount. That will also come from a no reply email. So you'll want to just make sure you check your junk or if it kind of gets rerouted there. But just a little bit more about the process. Let me just take you back to the beginning. I'm already at reporting. But once you're approved, I would say once you apply for a grant, give us, I would say 2 weeks max for us to make a decision. It never hurts to reach out and say, hey, did you receive my application? If you're worried about it, you're welcome to do that. But you do need to give us a little bit of time to make those decisions. So if you don't hear right away, we're still deliberating and deciding how we're going to spend the funds. So it doesn't hurt to check in. Feel free to do that and I can just verify for you. But you should get, once you submit your application, something that says, thank you for your submission. And then also once you complete your final report and you submit it, you should get an email saying your report has been approved once we've looked at it and approved it. So okay, from start to finish, you're informed on that process. Something that sometimes happens is that grantees don't spend all of their grant funds. So those are things we hope to talk about before the end of your project so that if you don't spend all the money, we can either figure out a way for you to find something else that will work for your project that we approve, or in some instances that doesn't work and then the funds will need to be returned. And so we don't like to take money back. So if you can spend all the funds and get it approved, that's what I encourage you to do. So that's kind of just a down and dirty overview of our grants, the processes, and I'm going to be creating an FAQ document. So some of these things I'll put on that document. So you could look at First 5 Shasta's website and see that, or of course, just email me and ask me questions. But and I'll also post this link on the First 5 Shasta website so that you can share it as needed, or we go back and look at some things. So at this time, I'd like to open it for questions and answers. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you guys. So give me just 1 second. Okay, so you're still muted, but it gives you the option to unmute yourself. Hopefully, if not, write me a chat. But at this time, please feel free to jump in and ask some questions. So what are your questions? No questions. Wow.
I think you did a really good job.
Thanks, Brian. Liz,
Yeah.
did I miss anything, Liz? Anything you think would be impertinent for this meeting to share?
No, I think you mostly covered it. Going back to the grant types and the commission grants, there might be something in the future that has a specific RFA around a particular goal or need or topic. For example, we in the past identified a need around supporting moms experiencing perinatal mood disorders. And so we put out an RFA looking for a provider to provide services specific to that need. So that is sort of another way to connect to our funds. That is a competitive grant process. But typically, if we do something like that, much like Jackie shared about the EAP grants and kind of having a separate Q&A for those, we would probably do another QFA for something that was that specific. So we would promote that through our email newsletters and our website. So you can always check on our website for other opportunities as they come up, anything new.
And that is really with us, the mentors, that's really what we specifically need right now is more understanding around the EAP grant. Because that's going to be encompassing a lot of our job for the next year or two. So yeah, if we could definitely do another one of these specifically on that, that would be great.
Yes,
Definitely.
coming soon. And I know that those grants I think are opening in September. So we're looking at that in the near future of addressing the IEEP EAP grants, which are a little bit different. And I think that someone from SCOE and myself will sort of be co-facilitating that since it is a partnership with SCOE, and Jen Snyder can definitely, I think, provide maybe more information than I, but we'll kind of tag team that one. I'm trying to think if there's anything else too that I forgot to share with you that I'd like to at this time. I don't think so. All right. Well, I'll just ask one more time if there's any other questions that arose or last minute stuff you wanted to just touch base about.
I will say I really like the examples that you use for the grants, like some of the ones that were written. That helps a lot when you're able to see, how people are writing them. And then like the example of not putting in detailed information about the purchases, the cost of everything, not a major breakdown, but enough to make you understand, that part was crucial to me as far as making sure I relay that to providers.
I think definitely just a general tip is imagine that because you really are telling your story to somebody, your request to somebody who has no background in what you're asking. And so we can't make assumptions and we can't go back and ask you questions. So all of the information that we would need to make a decision, anything that you think we should know really needs to be in that application in detail. And just imagine, and sometimes even it helps to have somebody read it who maybe isn't involved in the same work. Maybe it's a friend or a spouse. Just have them read it and see if they understand what you're asking, because sometimes they will have a different perspective and they don't maybe know, they're not in the middle of the project, and so they can see where the pieces are that are missing. Maybe it's a coworker in a different department, but that's really sometimes they'll see the gaps that you don't see because you know so much in your mind about what you want to do that sometimes we forget to actually write those things down, because in our head we already have the picture of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and I'm happy to meet with grantees prior. So say you're working on a rough draft too of your application and you need a little feedback, I can potentially help you do that by saying, "Oh, hey, like what did you mean by this?" Or, this doesn't really quite make sense to me. And at least if I can give you some ideas to make it to kind of bolster that application, I'm happy to do that. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee for funding. I mean, I don't make the final decision, but I mean, my role really is to provide TA and support, and we want you guys to be successful. And we like when there's an issue of so many great applications. I mean, that's a good thing. That means we have some great, um, you know, things happen in the community and projects and great proposals. And I understand that this might not be like the most comfortable thing for you to do to write a grant. So I definitely am here to answer questions or provide support ahead of time. But once we do get those applications in, then they're in, and that's that. And then we wait till review. So definitely contact me before you submit.
Well, that's awesome. And you're talking about providers too, right? Not just the mentors, but a provider can contact you and show you their rough draft.
Absolutely. And
Oh,
that's
that's great.
yeah, and that's happened
That's
in the
awesome.
we do that. And I think that's definitely helpful just because or even just having a friend or a neighbor, like Liz said, somebody, your spouse, looking at it, it's like, does this make sense to somebody who does has no information on your project? um so
Jackie, would you please, you mentioned that since this is recorded, you were going to upload it in the website. Would you please email us the link when it's up and running?
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'm just taking note too. Here's on the phone. I could send it to the mentor coaches, and then actually anybody who's on this call that wants the link, I can do that. If I'm just trying to think how I'm gonna get, if you could just provide your contact information, maybe that would be great. If you would like me to email you the link directly, and if not, it will be posted on the First Five website. So make sure you send that to me before you log off. Which I have all the mentor coaches. I'll send it to all you guys. Anybody else, please send me your contact info. I will email it directly. Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys. That's all that I have for today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jackie. Nice to see you.
You as well. Liz, do you want to stay on and debrief for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me
Okay.